Welcome back, everybody, into Bills Chat Live. I am Josh McCarty. With me, as always, is Luka. And Luka, it's football eve.
Yeah, I guess you could say that. I mean, look, we all know I am not exactly the biggest fan of preseason football and stuff like that. I will even be attending this game tomorrow. A friend of mine has offered a seat next to himself to join. I just look at it as a good opportunity to watch certain things and enjoy a beautiful Saturday, hopefully with some sun, although I think it's going to be a little windy out there in Orchard Park, and kind of enjoy the vibes and things like that. It's just a good way to spend the Saturday. So it's exciting though for everyone else. I know everyone else is big preseason football people out there. So we have a Bills game to talk about, and that's exciting. And I can even get behind that.
And I'm not going to the game. I live in St. Louis, but this is a great regular season tune up because although it is on Saturday, 1 o'clock kickoff, there's a game on at the same time, the Titans and the Bears. So I get to test my new TV setup now that I've switched away from DirecTV to Fubo since they lost Sunday Ticket. And yeah, we'll get it going. We have a lot to get into tonight, though, Luca, because we are going to talk about this Bills Colts preseason game. And what starters are we going to see? We know who we're not going to see. McDermott already said we will not see Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs tomorrow against the Colts. When will we see Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs? Luca and I will give our thoughts on that as we move along. What can we expect expectation wise, volume wise from first round pick Dalton Kincaid tomorrow? I have some thoughts on that, Luca, and I will get into that. And then I really want to dive into this wide receiver depth chart, Luca, because I think coming out of camp after the Andy Isabella signing, and with some of the guys that are shining on the bottom end of the roster, this might be the most interesting position group to track in these preseason games. So we have a lot to get into, but let's start it off with Sean McDermott on Thursday on the close of training camp said that we will see the majority of the starters, but that does not include Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs. Majority can be a loose word. We know that majority could just mean as many as more than half. But in your mind, Luca, are there any other starters that you would rule out at this point besides Allen and Diggs?
See, I would have thought that potentially Kincaid would have been ruled out, but he's not. The right guard position battle seems to be completely up in the air, although Bates might be walking away with a little bit more, even though I'm not exactly thrilled about that. I imagine they're both still going to play. It might be more lean on Torrance just because they want to get him some reps. I don't think there really is anyone else other than if they have any sort of knock, if anything's going on, of course, that comes up, then they won't play. They always play on the side of caution. But other than Diggs and Allen, based on McDermott's comments and stuff, I believe that I can't really rule out anyone else at that matter. If I see Gabe Davis playing and I see Kincaid will even be playing, it's really hard for me to see anyone else sitting out just because there are position battles. Maybe Trey White potentially could be sitting out. That could definitely factor in. Maybe the safeties, both Micah Hyde and Poyer, might get a series at most, something like that situation with them. But other than that, I just can't really rule anyone else out because McDermott made a point of emphasis to talk about Allen and Diggs not playing, but then also talk about starters and the majority of them playing. So if he didn't single someone out, it's hard for me then to kind of go, well, he's definitely not going to play this guy though as well.
And we talked about it last week that if we had it our way, we would not see a lot of the key guys. That included Dalton Kincaid, that included James Cook. That does not seem to be the way it's trending right now. I would guess that if they're going to err on the side of caution, I think maybe Ed Oliver doesn't play just because he had been dealing with the injury. He did come back. Potentially Deion Dawkins. He had the injury late in the week, but did come back the next day for practice. Without Josh Allen on the field, I mean, if Deion Dawkins is not even 100%, you just sit him. He's too valuable and he's not protecting the franchise quarterback. Mitch Morse and Matt Milano are two players that immediately come to mind because they played at a very high level last year and they do have various degrees of injury histories with very little to prove. And Matt Milano also plays a position where I think the Bills are going to want to get a look at a lot of guys. And then I think the secondary becomes interesting, Luca, because you mentioned Hyde, you mentioned Poyer, you mentioned White. For Micah Hyde, I can see the argument both ways. One, we know who Micah Hyde is. There's no need to get him out there. But similar to the guy backing him up, Damar Hamlin, you might want him to just knock the rust off in a game where he knows he's only going to play a series. Like, just get out there, tackle somebody in the other uniform, break up a pass on a player in the other uniform, and get on the sideline. And then next week in Pittsburgh, when I think we will be having our true dress rehearsal, he's already crossed that step. So sitting here tonight, I think you'll see I think you'll see the entire secondary out there for a drive or two. And then I think White, Poyer, and Hyde will be on the bench very early.
Yeah, that makes sense. I actually do like the idea or the mindset of knock the rust off. Get them out for a series, get them kind of comfortable, like you said, playing in opposition on a field, kind of being competitive, and then going from there, taking the rest of the day off. You're kind of just easing back into that feeling of competitive play where practice and training camp and all of these different things cannot simulate that. It cannot give you that kind of experience. So whereas you might want to be a little bit more cautious with those individuals, overall, you're going to just kind of want to get their feet wet, just get them kind of feeling that kind of game day rhythm again, and then pull them off to be cautious when it comes to injuries and just understanding who they are. So I'm with you on that. I actually agree with that kind of mindset. So yeah.
If you're watching on stream, which is where we're at, there's no audio version of this. So you're seeing me cough constantly. I am fine. I am not sick. I am just completely clumsy and the water went down the wrong pipe. And I've been dealing with that since the start of the show. But I think we're good, Luka. I think I'm ready to shake it off and get out there and do my 111th. Let's talk about Allen and Diggs, because McDermott did say that Josh Allen will play at some point in this preseason. And I think that just puts all eyes next week on Pittsburgh, because what you don't want to do is you don't want to wait until that last week. The last week is the closest preseason game to the regular season. So knock on wood, knock on whatever, cross your fingers, cross your toes. Nothing's going to happen to Josh Allen. But if he even just dings himself, if he does something to his fingernail that causes a slight discomfort, you just want to build in that extra week of a runway before the regular season to get healthy. So I think now that we're down to 3 preseason games, that the full dress rehearsal will be next week in Pittsburgh, Luka.
Yeah, I think being that they will play, they're going with kind of everything we've seen over the past few years. It's going to be the same kind of schedule, the same rhythm, everything like that. You're going to see kind of that dress rehearsal next week in Pittsburgh. It makes sense. It's week 2 of the preseason, and then week 3 of the preseason becomes kind of all the depth players, all your young players. You're just getting out there to get them some game time, evaluate them before you have to then make those tough decisions and move on forward. So next week has been circled as that time. We will see 17 and 14 out there in some capacity, and we will move on as if it was any other preseason. I know we kind of brought up, or maybe, myself brought up a point or question where, being that this is the one home preseason, would they change that up? Clearly not. McDermott is just a kind of a guy who likes routine, a guy who likes a structure. He's sticking with it. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with it whatsoever. You give them one more week of practice, and then they can do it how they need to in week 2 and go on with their day. No problems with that whatsoever.
John Robert brought up a good point. We will not be seeing Terrell Bernard in this game. He had a hamstring injury that popped up on the last day of training camp, and that probably all but seals his chances of winning the middle linebacker job from Tyrell Dotson. He was behind in that race. I do think it at least slightly opens the door for a player like a Balin Spector to put himself back in that race, should he have a really good preseason game with the extra snaps he's going to see. But Terrell Bernard and Damian Harris will not be on the field tomorrow. They've both been dealing with various injuries. Obviously, Von Miller and Tyler Matakevich will also not be out there for the Buffalo Bills. Luka, there's a comment in here from Roy Collins, who is just one of our favorites. He's here every week, and he says, waiting to see which non-top 5 wide receiver has some nice games, causing Bills fans to debate whether he earned a roster spot or not. And that's where I want to start off this conversation with wide receivers, because the perceived top 5 right now is Diggs and Davis, obviously, Khalil Shakir, Trent Sherfield, and Deontay Hardy. But when you look underneath them, you have Justin Shorter, who's a 5th-round pick, is a 4-phase special teamer, has very intriguing athletic attributes, and is a rookie. And then you have Andy Isabella, who has been actually making plays offensively in camp, and should he pop a kick return in the preseason, could answer 2 different needs for these Bills. And then I want you all to listen to this name, because unless you're paying super close to training camp coverage, you may not have heard of it. Tyrell Shavers, undrafted free agent from the University of Alabama, a 6'4" wide receiver that by all accounts has made the most of his opportunity in camp. I think right now he's tracking to be a priority free agent practice squad for the Buffalo Bills. But where I'm going with all this, Luka, is the Bills are only going to keep 6 wide receivers, I think. And I think just lock it in stone, Diggs, Davis, Hardy, and Sherfield are going to be on the roster. I think Shorter's going to be a lock. Are we sure Khalil Shakir needs to be a lock? I know we were all excited when the Bills drafted him in the 5th round last year, and we thought maybe the Bills got 2nd or 3rd round value with that pick. But the story on Khalil Shakir in training camp is, despite getting ample opportunities with the first team, it's been very up and down, inconsistencies with catching. And I look at what's behind him, whether it's Andy Isabella, who can contribute in the kick return game and maybe a better offensive player at this stage, or Justin Shorter, who is one less year into his rookie deal. Does Khalil Shakir have to make the roster?
I don't think anyone other than the few have to make the roster. What I will say is he still, to me, has a bit of an inside track. But on top of that, I think the door is open for those individuals such as Shavers, Isabella, other guys that are on the roster currently at this point in time, that if they are to still continue to pop, and Shakir is not really popping himself, which he has had flashes, of course, but he's shown even last season at times that he has flashes. There's inconsistency to that. So it's like if you continue to show your inconsistencies and then all of a sudden you have a guy like Andy Isabella who is stepping up and has kind of that high end speed to him, it becomes increasingly difficult to justify why you have a Khalil Shakir there. And instead of this other individual that then has also that return prowess to him, has that high end speed, all of these things to kind of bring that kind of dynamic feeling to this offense. It's I don't want to talk down on Shakir because the prospect of Shakir is still there. The problem is you now have other guys that are knocking at the door, and Shakir's just not keeping that door closed himself. I think there's kind of that inconsistency in him that's allowing the opportunity to be there for other individuals. So no, I don't believe Khalil Shakir is a lock, as crazy as it might sound to some. But overall, he still is kind of the guy inside the door at the moment in time. But there's complete opportunity there for your Tyrell Shavers, for your Andy Isabella, for those types of guys that if they kind of pop off in this preseason, if they continue to do what they're doing in practice now back in Orchard Park, now that training camp is done, if they continue to shine as they get opportunities, it becomes more and more difficult for Shakir unless he himself kind of answers the bell and kind of punches back a little bit and kind of finally gets his feet under him and becomes more consistent as a receiver, or else he could find himself on the outside looking in. And that's unfortunate because the projection of having him in this offense was of course exciting, but he should definitely not feel comfortable like he is absolutely a lock for this roster. No.
If I were making a 53-man roster today, Khalil Shakir would be on the inside looking out. That's not how the saying goes, but he would be on the roster. And I just wanted to bring up the topic only from the standpoint of, I have the opinion that if the Bills had their way before training camp started, that Khalil Shakir was going to be the 3rd wide receiver when they were in 11 personnel. It felt like he was the first man in line whenever they went to those formations. And I have my doubts now because you keep hearing one about how even when he does well, there's a drop that's mixed in. And you go back to OTAs when Stephon Diggs was away, the voluntary portion, we all understand. And Josh Allen raved about Trent Sherfield. Trent Sherfield filled in for Diggs, and Trent Sherfield has continued to do this, get better every day, take advantage of his opportunity. And then Deontay Hardy has something that nobody else in this wide receiver group has, which is just lightning fast speed. Now, Trent Sherfield has some speed. Both of those guys have more speed than Shakir, but Deontay Hardy is a game breaker. And I don't know that he's ever going to be an every down player. None of these guys are with what I expect them to do with Dalton Kincaid. But for what I think the Bills need out of this 3rd receiver in an offense with Stephon Diggs, Gabe Davis, Dalton Kincaid, Dawson Knox, and Josh freaking Allen, is for him to just do his job when the ball is thrown to him, and those drops are unacceptable. And I understand that we want to see draft picks hit, but this is a team that needs to win now. And if the Bills make the determination that Andy Isabella gives them a better chance to win this year, and they have to cut the legs off of, not literally, a rookie that's on the 2nd year of his 4-year rookie deal, then it is what it is. The bigger goal here is the most important part. And Andy Isabella probably isn't even the first name I'm thinking of. I'm thinking more of the Tyrell Shavers and the Justin Shorters of the world. And do the Bills want to go 6 wide receivers? I do think there's a conversation of could they go 7, but where's that other roster spot going to come from? So I want to have an open mind with what's going on with Khalil Shakir. And Izzy says Shakir is faster than Sherfield. I would push back very hard on that. Do you think Hardy has the lead at the slot? John Robert, that's a great question. I think right now Dalton Kincaid has the lead at the slot. I expect the Bills to give you a heavy diet of Dalton Kincaid at the slot, 12 personnel. And then I do expect the wide receiver position at wide receiver 3 when they are in 11 to be a mixed bag of guys like Sherfield and Hardy and Shakir. And one interesting thing that Ken Dorsey said this week is he would not, just because a guy is a kick returner, that doesn't mean that he would not focus on him having a role in the offense. But if he's a 4-phase special teamer, maybe he would dial it back, and that could hurt Sherfield. What do you think, Luka? Is there a guy that stands out right now as the leader of the pack there? Because I'm kind of getting a committee vibe from that wide receiver 3 spot.
I've been in the boat and camp of committee the whole time, and it just seems like that has just been the way it's tracking this whole time. We've talked on numerous programs and stuff like that about positionless football kind of being an individual that can do a lot of different things. You need to have a lot in your toolbox. You need to have capabilities of being able to do 2, 3, 4 different things. And because of that, it's almost like that wide receiver 3 position is even having Kincaid in the conversation, of course, as one of those kind of guys. So realistically, I don't know if there's kind of that standalone number 3, whereas I think there's more just based on package and looks and kind of what the offense is trying to execute. There are leaders for each of those kind of ways they want to go about it. You know, you have your 12 personnel and situation when it comes to Kincaid. And of course, we've talked about it almost to death that it's like, hey, this really seems to be something they're trying to press and they're going to want to do a lot this upcoming season. But then if they want to go back to that 3 wide, I think Hardy and Sherfield are such different players that there's almost a positive and negative to each of them. And you just want to kind of utilize them in their best ways, of course. And that's just going to come down to game planning and everything like that. So it just leans back into the committee argument. So overall, no, I don't think there's any standout. I think they're kind of all a committee situation. It's all package personnel situation. And that's what it's going to be going into the season and probably through the season. And I have no complaints with that. I think that's great. You're just trying to put these kind of role key players into positions or at least into places that they should be hopefully succeeding at the best of their abilities. And that's fine by me.
If you are watching on YouTube right now, please take a moment and hit that subscribe button. We would greatly appreciate it as we are continuing to try to build up this built-in Buffalo YouTube page so we can continue to bring you this content like we're doing tonight. Question here or a comment here from Roy Collins, which I think is the next obvious path here is if they only keep 3 running backs, which I would predict at this point. Now, this is in my brain classifying Reggie Gilliam as a tight end. 3 running backs would be Damian Harris, James Cook, and Latavius Murray. They could keep 7 receivers, but I will tell you, Roy, as somebody who's been obsessing over this 53-man depth chart, I have a hard time keeping 7 and keeping 3 running backs without squeezing off a defensive lineman that might make you feel uncomfortable, like a Shaq Lawson, or a defensive back that might make us all feel uncomfortable, like a Damar Hamlin. So that's where those tough conversations come in. And it's all the things the Bills are going to have to work with. And Luka and I actually have a plan for a 53-man roster projection show coming up in a couple weeks. We have some special guests lined up for that. We will announce that at a later date, but you've all heard of them, and we are very much excited about that. And I will tell you, Luka, this question from Charles Rizzo is where I want to go next. Do you think Gabe Davis has his first 1,000-yard season? I've seen a lot of optimism on Gabe Davis from what we've seen at training camp. And you and I were admittedly skeptical after what we saw last year. And we know he dealt with the high ankle sprain week 2, and that really did slow him down. Felt like he was really missing that 5th gear as the season went on in his routes. And, you know, from playing sports is when you're overcompensating from an injury that you're not used to playing with, your focus can't be on 100% elsewhere. So I think some of his concentration drops could actually be him just thinking about his ankle hurting. It makes sense in my brain. I am not ready to anoint Gabe Davis after a strong August. I've seen Duke Williams. I've seen Brandon Riley. If you go back long enough, you've seen Clarence Coleman. But we've seen Gabe Davis play well in the NFL when it matters. I would say that for where we're at here on August 11th, everything you've wanted to see from Gabe Davis, we have seen. It's fantastic. It's much better than the alternative to hear he can't get open in camp. But I still am in the camp of I want to see him do it in the regular season consistently, week after week after week. I don't want to see 200 yards against Pittsburgh and then 3 weeks in a row where he only gets 2 catches. If he can get past that, if he can become a more reliable target for Josh Allen, presenting himself as a reliable target at all areas of the field and not just deep, well, then the sky is the limit for Gabe Davis.
Yeah. The wrap-up point you just brought up there is spot on. You just need consistency. You just need him to be a more reliable target, of course. Hopefully he can be that. But even going further, I think you're a little harsh in bringing up examples of why you don't want to go at him when it comes to his August. That's pretty brutal because none of those guys even showed anything in the regular season, where Gabe Davis has at least showed something. But overall, yeah, I want to see it to believe it, of course. I love the optimism, and the one thing I'm gathering from this August reports when it comes to Gabe Davis and everything kind of being shining and bright and beautiful when it comes to his kind of projection right now is that he's clearly a hard worker. And he even voiced how criticism and just doubts about him last year were getting to him at times. I can't remember when and where that came up, but I know it's out there, public record. But overall, he hears the doubters. He heard the problems and everything like that. And he clearly is motivated by it, and he's taking another step forward, at least in his work ethic and in his mindset moving forward. That I love to hear that kind of stuff. I love to hear someone who's clearly mentally strong enough to try to break through that and then build up upon that. That's a great thing to have. And I hope he is successful, because clearly everything between the ears is what you want in a guy in this locker room. He's a guy you want there. It's all there. He just needs to be able to put it together on the field production wise. And I will happily pay the man if he can just finally show a little bit of something there. That'd be awesome to me. He's easy to root for at this point in time. He's easy to root to succeed because of everything that's happening right now when he talks, what he has shown us in camp, and what he's going to continue to show us in this preseason. I imagine it's all there for him. He just needs to be able to do it a few times, a little bit more consistently, for us to finally buy in and believe that he can be that 1,000-yard receiver, because he absolutely has the capabilities, just has to put a few things together.
And Josh Allen loves him. And that could be the most important part of this equation. Josh Allen has seen receivers he's loved leave the building. And I think if Josh Allen has some power in that building, and honestly, I think Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott love him. I think he's thought of higher in that building than he is thought of if you were to take a popularity poll among fans. David 824, we appreciate the hell out of you for not only choosing to spend your Friday night with us, but doing a super chat for $1.99. Thank you so much. And we hope you have yourself a great weekend. John Robert with, I read even Dawson Knox has plays in the backfield. No clue what. Luka, this is an interesting point, because I think when the Bills drafted Dalton Kincaid, the easy move for all of us to make was, oh, well, this probably is going to scale back what Dawson Knox does in this offense. He's going to be the inline blocker at tight end and maybe kind of take on the extreme way of looking at it, that Lee Smith role. Well, Dawson Knox is not Lee Smith. Dawson Knox he's not Travis Kelce. He's not Mark Andrews. He's not George Kittle. He's not Darren Waller. He's in that next tier, though. And he is a very explosive tight end. He was top 10 in yards per catch, top 5 in touchdowns at tight end last year. And Luka, for this 2 tight end offense to work, you need both of these guys on the field being matchup problems. We're all excited about Dalton Kincaid, but Dawson Knox is still going to be a very important player for these Bills.
1,000%. I think it's easy, like you said, to overlook the Knox factor when realistically, when you look back at it the past couple seasons, the reason they gave him the extension that they did is because he could kind of play that positionless tight end, slot when it comes to what he can do and his capabilities. He would be kind of lined up wide at times and be able to be just a legitimate receiver. He can, of course, block and do all that stuff. Yeah, you don't need to limit what you do in Knox just because all of a sudden you have a shiny new toy in Dalton Kincaid. You kind of want them to both have the abilities to do either or, because then you have yet another level of keeping the defense guessing. You need to continue to have weapons and abilities that keep it guessing when it comes to the defense that you're playing against. Everyone needs to be positionless. If you want to do anything with this offense successfully week in, week out throughout the entire season, going into the postseason, you need to keep defenses guessing. And the best thing you can do with that is if all of a sudden you have Kincaid out there and Knox, they both can do either or. They can both do the same thing. They can both line up wherever you need them to be successful for this offense, just like all these positionless wide receivers we talked about, or package wide receivers we talked about, or the running backs even playing wide when it comes to like James Cook. All these different things need to happen so that you just really don't know what you have in front of you if you're the opposition. And then hopefully Josh Allen can stay and Dorsey for that matter can stay a step forward and ahead of what the defense is trying to achieve so that they can be successful. Knox is an absolute vital piece of this offense and will continue to be. And it's exciting. I don't think anyone overlooks it, but it's just easy to forget about him at the same time, just because of, again, I'll say it one more time, that shiny new toy in Kincaid. It's exciting with the high end projection you can have for a guy like him. And you hear, Sims talk about a better blocking version of Kelsey, who's a little bit needs to refine a little bit more. It's like that. When you hear Kelsey can block better, like things like that, it's like, okay, like it gets you really excited naturally, but also you need to rein yourself in because there is still that guy and Dawson Knox that is completely capable as a receiver and blocker and everything else. Like he can line up wherever and be successful. So yeah, it's just an interesting thing just because you have one thing. So naturally it pulls your attention away from the other that's already been there for the past few years.
Well, the reviews on Dalton Kincaid could not have been better as training camp has gone on. He has seemingly become one of Josh Allen's favorite targets. He's made highlight reel level catches and has been stealing the show at training camp. But Luka, tomorrow against the Colts will be the first time that many folks that didn't get out to St. John Fisher will get to see Dalton Kincaid. And my question to you is, what do you expect to see from Dalton Kincaid tomorrow? Do you think because he's a rookie, he'll get an extended look and play into that late first quarter, like McDermott said some starters will? Or will this be a quick cup of coffee drive and get him on the sideline?
No, I can picture him playing basically the first quarter. Like kind of the starter mindset with a lot of the other guys. Kind of give him a couple drives because I think there's value in just kind of, you don't want to do one drive with him and pull him off, or you can do that, but I think there is value in having him go out there for another drive and just kind of get comfortable with getting back out there and trying something else. And I guarantee in the game plan, in the scripted plays for the offense, there's probably 2, 3, 4 plays that are going to be primary looks when it comes to like probably a quick out, something real simple and basic, of course, but going to Kincaid just to get his hands on a ball in gameplay and kind of get him comfortable. It's not about the fans in that sense. It's more about Kincaid himself, just getting him comfortable in that environment at the next level so that, once the time comes that he needs to be doing that under the bright lights of that is week one right out the gate on Monday Night Football, he's already kind of used to it at that time. And I'm sure he's going to be out there for the entire period of time when it comes to Allen's offense week 2 against Pittsburgh, preseason week 2, I should say, and stipulate. But overall, I anticipate tomorrow for him to get a couple drives in there. I anticipate for him to be kind of pegged with all those other starters that McDermott was talking about going late into the first, if not the entire first quarter, depending on how the game goes. So I easily see that scenario for him more so than kind of single drive, get him out there, get his feet wet, and then get him off to the sideline like a Micah Hyde or something else might be in the secondary on the defensive side.
I'm with you. I think he'll be out there for a couple of drives. I think there'll be a play or two that is specifically drawn up, a one read play, easy pitch and catches to get his feet wet, get the fans excited, and get him out there. I would not expect to see anything fancy with him. I would not be surprised if he lines up in line tomorrow. I think it's going to be very basic. The whole offense is going to be very basic. But Dalton Kincaid has been the Bills' biggest offensive investment this offseason as far as the capital they spent to get him and the guy that is supposed to inject the most upgrade into this offensive passing game. So they certainly aren't going to show their hand tomorrow against the Colts backups. Quickly, Luka, are you excited about Anthony Richardson tomorrow?
Yes. It's funny to say, but the number one person I will be paying attention to is the opposition's quarterback in Anthony Richardson. Being that I will be there, I am fascinated to see it's kind of the way I felt about a Josh Allen in a sense, or I'm trying to think, Trey Lance, stuff like that. Guys who came into the league with a lot of athletic ability, but there's a lot of questions, unknowns. There's a lot of raw athleticism to them. So it's like, okay, how are they going to be in their first game time action? I mean, we just saw last night, or most saw, I did not. I only hear this through all reports and highlights because I do not watch preseason normally in my off hours. But CJ Stroud was kind of being just absolutely obliterated in social media, and everyone's already willing to claim that he's a bust. It's preseason. I'm not going to be that guy about Anthony Richardson, but I'm fascinated to see how he performs in that first game.
I am too. And I want to root for the player. I mean, we can all certainly empathize with what it's like to spend a high draft pick on a quarterback and then watch the preseason games just nervous and excited. We saw the good with Josh Allen. We saw it with EJ Manuel. If you're old enough like me, you saw it with JP Lossman. All those guys had moments of optimism. Lossman was a little rough around the edges. He didn't play much his rookie year because he got hurt. Troy Vincent decided to lay him out in training camp. Anyway, I want to get to Sue Ann's question here because I think it's a good one before we pivot off of Dalton Kincaid here. Is there going to be too much pressure on Dalton Kincaid as a rookie? And that's interesting, Luka, because that's one thing I think that gets lost in this conversation of his athletic ability and the mismatch that he and Dawson Knox can put on defenses, and the 5 eligible receivers the Bills have the potential to go out there with Davis, Diggs, Knox, Kincaid, and James Cook, with Josh Allen at any point a threat to run with it. Is he still a rookie? And he can be as polished as we want, and he can run routes like a 10-year vet, and he has the best hands in the draft. We've heard it all, but he's still a rookie. And the first time he steps on the field is going to be Monday Night Football against Aaron freaking Rodgers and the New York Jets on national TV when the whole world is watching. So to just assume he's going to be fine would be a leap. But having watched a lot of football in my day and understanding that all of these rookies are projections, we don't know anything about any of them. I have not seen one hint of anything from Dalton Kincaid, both his personality and his production to this point and what he did in college, that suggests this is going to be hard for him at all to get over the pressure.
Yeah, I don't live in a world for the most part where these kind of high-end rookies feel pressure like what we kind of used to feel like with these professional athletes, say 10, 15, 20 years ago, because I think they're more and more trained now to really handle attention and being in the limelight 24/7. I mean, social media and everything like that alone kind of just naturally trains you to understand that you're always being watched, you're always being evaluated, you're always being judged, things like that by people you may know or not know. It doesn't matter. And that's kind of really what it is. Like, say 20, 25 years ago, before Twitter and social media was so prevalent in sports and everything for that matter, I think it was more because those moments, say week 1 on Monday night, that's kind of your first exposure at that time to the world. And up until that point, no one really kind of had a lot going on. It's like Dalton Kincaid has kind of lived in a world of social media and being under the microscope going back to college. Now, this is the pros. This is another leap. Yes. And I do think there will be the natural jitters just when it comes to his own internal kind of, it's you're starting a new job. It's your first day on the job with it's your first sales call. It's your first, your big project that you're managing, whatever it might be that you do professionally. It's the first big thing that you've done. You're going to have your natural jitters with that. But I think that will be it when it comes to Kincaid. I don't know if pressure is necessarily going to get to him. And on top of that, I just want to credit Bills players, the Bills coaching staff, all of them, like Dawson Knox, for example, just to single out one individual. Every time Dalton Kincaid is brought up, every time Kincaid becomes the focus of your conversation and everything, he kind of goes above and beyond and goes out of his way to kind of just talk about him, talk about how much he loves them, the team loves them, loves him, and everything like that. And I think there's something in that when it comes to they're preparing him really what I think to kind of being a key player right out the gate and being under the microscope, since he's kind of that high-end rookie on this competitive team, this Super Bowl contending team. They understand that there's something there. And I think there's, something to be said with how this team is, managing the psychology of Kincaid and kind of prepping him for that, because they also understand that he will be under the spotlight a lot when they're on a lot of national televised games. And then week in, week out, they're going to be in the national media. So he needs to be prepared for that. And they're doing a great job just kind of going above and beyond to talk about him and just let him be in kind of the spotlight so that he's used to it by that point in time.
One other piece of this, and I really like this question by Sue Ann because I hadn't really thought of it, and it's a good thought experiment. Is if I always talk about my age, you don't have to be this old to remember this, but back in 2014, when the Bills traded up to get Sammy Watkins, he had to come in right away and be the alpha in that room. I mean, they had Robert Woods and Marquise Goodwin. Charles Clay was not even here yet. So I mean, maybe Scott Chandler at that point, but it was the Sammy Watkins show. He had to come in and be the reason why the passing game worked with a quarterback that was not fully developed like Josh Allen is. It was EJ Manuel going into his second year, and then eventually Kyle Orton. What Dalton Kincaid walks into is an established group where Stephon Diggs is gonna be the straw that stirs the drink in this passing attack as far as weapons goes. And we know Gabe Davis and Dawson Knox will do their thing. And Josh Allen is one of the best quarterbacks in football. So as much as we are counting on him to be an addition to this offense without him was top 5. So I think that does take some of the pressure off. He doesn't have to go out there and be the best player on the field against the Jets for the Bills to win. Would it be nice if he was? Yes. But Dalton Kincaid could stub his toe the night before the game, miss the game, and the Bills could still win. So I think that's the difference in my mind is when you look at when Sammy Watkins came into the league, what was expected out of him and what Kincaid, where his role is on this team. That's where the difference is to me. Luka, we talked a little bit about the Colts quarterback, Anthony Richardson, how we're excited about him. Let's talk about the Bills quarterbacks, because one of the stories out of camp has been the lackluster showing by Kyle Allen. And then, we kind of know who Matt Barkley is at this point, but there's two schools of thought. I tweeted a quote earlier this week of Tom Moore, the old Indianapolis Colts offensive coordinator, when he was asked why backup quarterbacks never get reps in practice. And I'm gonna mellow down the language in case there's kids out there. He said, if 18, Peyton Manning, if 18 ever goes down, we're effed. And we don't practice effed around here. And Luka, that is kind of my mindset with these Buffalo Bills and Kyle Allen and Matt Barkley. But how much are you going to be clued into how well Kyle Allen plays tomorrow, and how much is it going to matter to you?
I'll be clued into it enough since I'm in the stadium. I won't care one bit, to be quite honest. I want him to get the ball to Kincaid, for instance, or whoever else is out there that might still be vital to this roster in a safe and efficient way. And I care more about the play of Kyle Allen when it comes to the positions that he's putting the players in more so than him himself. Because, yeah, I mean, backup quarterbacks are kind of that thing that you like. I've said it before. They are the ultimate insurance policy where you never want to have to tap into it. You do not want to see yourself have to dig into your insurance policy in order to kind of recuperate or, recover whatever it is you're trying to fix. It's like, no, that's a problem. You want your car to be okay and on the road without any dings, knocks, accidents, anything like that. You do not need to handle that being in the shop for whatever period of time. And all of a sudden you have to go into your insurance policy to figure it out from there. That is not good for anyone. We do not need to worry about life with Kyle Allen and or Matt Barkley. I just need them to go out in preseason and not put anyone else in harm's way because they're of subpar play. That is what I am worried about when it comes to tomorrow with them. But overall, it's like, I don't care about, Kyle Allen or Matt Barkley, who wins the backup job. I need whoever it is to be the one that they trust the most in that number 2 position. And hopefully for him to never have to put on a helmet their entire time here this season. And they can just be holding a clipboard and be Josh Allen's buddy on the sideline every week. And that's okay with me.
Roy Collins with a question, is Kyle Allen a lock? Well, Roy, I think it depends what you mean by a lock. Is he a lock to be the number 2? I would say no. I think he's the favorite to be the number 2. He's going to start the game tomorrow, but I don't think that means he has to win the number 2 job. When you put the contracts of Kyle Allen and Matt Barkley side by side, they're eerily similar, both basically different variations of the league minimum for a veteran quarterback. And I don't think it would be a shock to me if Matt Barkley wins the backup job and Kyle Allen gets released and then added to the practice squad. I'm mostly with Luka. It doesn't matter because there's really 2 different scenarios where your backup quarterback comes in. It's one, Josh Allen is out for the rest of the year. And at that point, folks, I love this roster. If Josh Allen's out for the rest of the year, I will probably morph into hoping they lose the rest of their games and maybe get Marvin Harrison Jr. Now, if it happens in the playoffs, well, yeah, you're in the playoffs. You hope for the best or whatever. But let's be realistic. Josh Allen is the primary reason why the Bills are in that Super Bowl conversation. But if you're talking about a couple of games, or you're talking about the rest of a game, like maybe he goes into concussion protocol and the league doesn't let him come back into the game, I just need Kyle Allen or Matt Barkley to be able to come in and keep the car on the rails. don't turn the ball over, rely on the running game, get the ball in the hands of the playmakers. I think both are capable of that. But yeah, I would, to tell you I was confident in the backup quarterback would be a lie. I think Mike Shope on WGR had a great point though today. He said the problem with Kyle Allen and Matt Barkley when you're watching them in camp is they're coming in right after Josh Allen. So you're watching like a top 3, top 4 quarterback in the entire sport, and then you're watching like the 60th best quarterback, and then trots in the 90th best quarterback. There is a drop off there. There's a talent gap, and I think that's important to keep in mind when we're figuring out the backup quarterback situation. I still would predict that Kyle Allen is the guy to end up ultimately backing up Josh Allen. We appreciate you all hanging out with us now. We have a chat full of people. Any more questions for us? We'll happily get to them. But Luka, I have compiled a list of the 5 things that I am excited to watch for in tomorrow's game against the Colts. Are you as excited as I am to go through this list?
I'm going to go ahead and say no. I think you're the most excited for this because it's talking about preseason football and things to watch where my attention is already not 100%. But yeah, I'm excited to go through it anyways, Josh. I'm excited to hear what you have to say.
So it started off as 5 players to watch, and knowing me, it immediately turned into 7 because I can't even follow my own rules. So then it became 5 things to watch, but it really is going to be players. And I will tell you all that at least for now, my focus is on the back end of the roster. I think there will be a point here in mid-August where we start to have that realization we have every year where, okay, we've spent so much of the last 2 months focusing on who the 4th cornerback is and who the 4th tackle is. And that ultimately is just not going to matter whatsoever once the season starts. But for now, I do want to keep my focus there of the guys that will make the roster. But the first guy I'm going to mention, I think, does have at least a glimmer of hope of being a starter on this team. Balen Spector. The injury to Terrell Bernard on Thursday, I do think closed the door on his chances of being a starting middle linebacker for the Bills, at least to start the season. But what this did is it gave Balen Spector a much larger snap share in this game against the Colts, an opportunity to go out there as a second-year player and prove himself. I still think Tyrell Dodson is going to be the starting middle linebacker opening night against the Jets. But if Balen Spector goes out there in 3/4 of play and has 12 tackles, a couple tackles for loss, maybe gets his hands on an interception, that's the kind of stuff that it'll be hard to deny. And if he shows athleticism, quite frankly, if he shows the direct opposite of what we saw from Bernard last year, where the game just looked like it was moving way too fast for him in preseason, if he shows decisiveness and instincts and coverage, I think there's a path for Balen Spector to re-enter this middle linebacker conversation. It's unfortunate for Bernard, but Luka, you know this as well as I do. Oftentimes in sports, these one-on-one battles for starting jobs, it does come down to level of play, but sometimes they sort themselves out with injuries, and an injury creates an opportunity for somebody else.
The best ability is availability. That's what you have to be available, and you have to seize the opportunities when they're presented. And that's what this is. It might be because of unfortunate circumstances at the expense of another player, but overall, this is an opportunity for Spector to get his name back in the hat and just be seen if he can then kind of be seen and kind of stand out in that middle linebacker position, because there could be something if he pops off on the tape, if he's live game and on the tape, Spector is popping off and he's just looking phenomenal. And Dodson kind of just becomes the vanilla ice cream that he is to the coaching staff. And it's like, okay, let's see if we can continue that next week in Pittsburgh. And then, that same outcome happens again. And he's showing good things in practice. Yeah. By the time you get to the preseason game 3, where you do normally play a lot of those depth guys to kind of really hone in those kind of roster decisions, the 53-man roster, maybe all of a sudden you do mix in Dodson and Spector again when you didn't think you were going to be doing that, because you just want to give it one more opportunity in that 3rd preseason game, just because Spector has played himself back into that. I think there is an opportunity there for him. It's again, one more time, due to an unfortunate circumstance with Bernard, but overall, players can step up in those moments and really stand out among the rest. And if Spector were to be able to do that, it's awesome to see, but he needs to be able to seize it. He has to kind of show up. Tomorrow's a very big, big day for Balen Spector. That's for sure. I think it's weird to say it's a preseason game. It's week 1 of the preseason, but when it comes to the landscape of his career and kind of where he's projecting on this roster, especially in the immediate future, it's a big game for him, because if he can seize that opportunity, I'm with you. I think this is a moment for him to potentially get his name back in the ring at that middle linebacker position battle and maybe kind of make some noise with it going into then Pittsburgh, where there will be a lot more starter game time and stuff like that. And maybe he can pop off again and become a legitimate competitor for that spot.
And there's more than one job available for him right now. We're focusing on starting middle linebacker, but what if he plays well enough to leapfrog Terrell Bernard as the first linebacker off the bench? And that could create a midseason opportunity for him with an injury to one of the two linebackers to come in and play and leapfrog Terrell Bernard and the other backups, AJ Klein, guys like that. All right, Dorian Williams. Number 2, Alex Austin, Bills 7th round pick cornerback. Now, this is down the depth chart. I don't think Alex Austin's going to factor much into the Bills' success in 2023, but this is a loaded DB room. It's hard to make a 53-man roster without cutting off a name like a DeMar Hamlin or a Cam Lewis right now. It's just tough. It really is. Or Saran Neal. Alex Austin is a guy with 4 years of service on his rookie deal since they drafted him. Is if he can show enough to make that conversation difficult, the Bills could talk themselves into adding him to the back end of that roster because they have 4 years of cost control. Luka, I know we talked about him a little bit last week. He's not super consequential for this particular season, but is Alex Austin somebody you think that could elevate himself to roster status with a strong preseason?
Yeah, absolutely. He can elevate himself. It's going to take a lot. I think, like you said, it's a very loaded room. And when it comes to the conversation of make or break this roster, he kind of has things stacked up against him. Just because I think more of the extras that could be held onto the roster are not necessarily your third boundary corner when it comes to a single side on the depth chart. You're probably looking more at your Dean Marlowe or your, other guys like Siran Neal, things like that. Those are going to be the kind of the on the brink of the 53. And unfortunately for Alex Austin, he is definitely below both of those individuals. So it's tough for him. But if he can, seize the opportunity of just getting that second half, I'm assuming tomorrow he will be second half kind of in the play. But overall, he's going to need to stand out. He's going to need to be able to do a lot to show this coaching staff and show everyone that he needs to get a second look and maybe an opportunity to crack that 53-man roster. I just think there's a lot stacked against him where it's going to take an incredible performance for him to kind of change the minds.
Luka, I can't resist what's going on in chat right now. I know the look on your face. I have to get to it. Gonzalez, Lucas, why are you all such Khalil Shakir haters? And he follows it up with, Khalil has done nothing but ball out in all field time he's been given. He will be the wide receiver 3 this year and continue to show guys like you, Luka, how good he is. Gonzalez, my guy, I don't know if you showed up later or not, but we both predicted Khalil Shakir will make this roster. It's just more about, is he for sure going to be the wide receiver 3? And at this point, I would say no. We settled on it. It's going to be a committee situation. I'm curious what you mean, and I'm not going to get into a dialogue with you because you don't have a microphone, but what you mean by he's balled out every time he's been given a chance on the field, because we watched the games last year. We saw the missed block against Pittsburgh. We saw the drop against Miami that really was this in the playoffs, that really was the catalyst for starting Miami's comeback. So yes, there were some exciting plays. And yes, there was a touchdown against Pittsburgh that got us all excited. And there were some trust balls from Josh Allen that he threw up there that were like, wow, he really trusts this guy. But to say he balled out is just really overstating what we saw at Khalil Shakir. Luka, anything to add, or you want me to move on to my list?
I'm not a Khalil Shakir hater. I just wanted to say that. I'm sorry that Gonzalez might see it that way. Overall, I mean, calling him a lock for the roster, it's not like it's a crazy stretch, but I do think there's a conversation to be had there. But overall, it's like, hey, he seized flash opportunities, but there were also holes in his game that are enough there, and why this conversation's being had and why they felt the need to bring in a Sherfield and, individuals like that, and why you're hearing, other individuals deeper on the depth chart kind of shine in camp because they bring other things to this offense. And Shakir is just one of that mix. And there's nothing wrong with that too. I just want to emphasize, you brought it up as well. Like we just talked about a committee position there at wide receiver 3. There's nothing wrong with that. it gives you more abilities on offense as a whole. And the objective is to be a most productive offense that you can be week in, week out based on different looks and personnel that you have across from you. So just being locked in on one guy is not necessarily the best way to go about it unless they're a sheer all pro guy, or, like a guy like a Tyler Boyd, a very high end wide receiver 3, where it's like, yeah, you are going to play him because the gap between him and everyone else in basically every facet of the game is better. Khalil Shakir is not a Tyler Boyd. I would love to hear that argument if someone wants to even remotely try that one on me. But he's not Tyler Boyd. He's not Steve Breston of 2008. He's not a for sure wide receiver 3, and that's okay. He doesn't need to be at this point in time. Just needs to be productive in that committee at the wide receiver 3 position.
Lucas, we appreciate the feedback. We certainly hope that we present ourselves as an open forum to disagree with us. We are certainly never not always right. We'll be the first to say, hey, we were wrong about this, we were wrong about that. And we certainly appreciate you hanging out. And you're right. He did lead the receivers in the playoff game against the Bengals, 2 catches for 40 yards. Offense as a whole, down day. I think Knox was the leading receiver for the day anyway. But you ended it with love what you guys do, talking Bills Mafia, just my prediction. I hope you're right. I would love nothing more than to be wrong about Khalil Shakir. And my wrong is I don't think he's elevated himself to a point where he should be significantly outsnapping Sherfield or Hardy. That's kind of where I'm at right now. And hopefully by the end of the year, he's proven us wrong, you right, because that'll be a great thing for the Buffalo Bills. We'll get back to my list in a second. What do you think about the O-line when we play the Bills? Well, oh my gosh, NFL is the GOAT. You are perfect here. This is a perfect transition back.
I was going to say, are you going back to your list?
right to the list, because number 3, things to watch on my list. And this is where I went from 5 players to watch to 5 things to watch, because I list 3 players here under one. Makes sense if you have my messed up brain. Tommy Doyle, Ryan Van DeMark, and Richard Garage. And the reason why I list those is those are the depth tackles on this team that are all young, very unproven. But Luka, we were talking all offseason about how, man, if Deion Dawkins were to miss some time, I don't know how great we feel about David Quessenberry and Brandon Shell coming in. And those guys do seem like they do have the path to the roster right now. But it sure would be nice for one of these young offensive tackles to give the Bills a reason to think about it, to come out of nowhere, be that surprise. I mean, 2004, the Bills took an undrafted tight end named Jason Peters. He turned out to be a franchise left tackle. Am I predicting any of these guys do this? No. But Ryan Van DeMark was a very interesting athletic flyer the Bills took off of the Colts practice squad last season. Richard Garage has had some decent moments in camp, albeit with the third team. Tommy Doyle has not had a good camp. Still looks like he's fighting coming back from that ACL injury. But I'm at a point, Luka, where I would love one of these 3 guys to give the Bills an excuse to move off of one of Quessenberry or Shell.
I look at it as this. Quessenberry and Shell are kind of the disappointing but expected depth that it's like, hey, most likely this is what we're going into in the season, and you know exactly what you're getting into. It's not anything you want to depend on and rely on when it comes to, if long-term injuries occur with the starting 5 on the offensive line, but they can at least hopefully be serviceable enough to get you by. What's exciting, or why I can understand why you have Doyle, Van DeMark, and Garage on the actual list here to watch tomorrow, is it's the prospect of unknown and the prospect of, can they step back up? Doyle, there might be less of an unknown of because we've seen him in the past. And then also the reports also haven't been very good coming out of camp. But overall, there's still promise when it comes to his age and, potentially his ceiling still not being met. And that's kind of the conversation here. It's all about ceiling. It's all about projection. Can one of these guys prove something that kind of jumps them ahead the disappointment? I just put my hand in front of my face. Jumps them ahead the disappointment that is, and I don't want to say disappointment in such a negative light, but that's really what it becomes when you have just your depth offensive line being Quessenberry and Shell. It's a little bit of a disappointment. They're just aging veterans that kind of are what they are. There's nothing about them that's promising or kind of makes you feel comfortable if they ever have to do anything within this offense. You want to see if there is something else, and maybe you have a sneaky little gem of a depth offensive line piece with Van DeMark or Garage. Like, that would be so nice to kind of have that luxury of a guy project forward and kind of get himself above the ceiling that is below average depth piece or average depth piece. Like you want to see if there's maybe something there to then maybe give you that tackle depth that we really haven't had for years now. And it's hard to come by. No team really has tackle depth. If a team had tackle depth, I'm pretty sure they'd be trying to trade him for like 2 firsts at this point, because it just doesn't exist. You don't even have 32 teams worth of left tackles in the league, it seems like. So overall, it's a pretty thin position around the league. But it'd be nice to see Vandermark or someone like that step up and really become something that we didn't really see them being up until this point. I like this. I like this point of your list. I like this a lot because it's kind of trying to get something out of nothing in the hopes of getting better depth moving forward.
Number 4 on my list is not a roster bubble player. He's actually somebody that still has a very good shot to be a starter, and that is second round pick Osiris Torrance. Luka, it feels like to me the momentum is moving toward Ryan Bates being the week 1 starter, both with the folks on site reporting what's going on. Ryan Bates looks like he's slightly outplaying Osiris Torrance. Torrance may have leveled off as camp has moved on, and that's okay. He's a rookie. You expect that, and you'd rather him level off now where he's still in the coachable phase of his career than level off 2 years into his career as an average player. But I feel like for Osiris Torrance to get back into this race, he needs to have a very good preseason game against the Colts. And I think he's going to play a lot. And I'm excited to see what he does with that opportunity, because you and I both would prefer Osiris Torrance on the field. And it's not because he's the brand new shiny toy we got in the draft. I mean, sure, there's a piece of that there, but he was largely considered the best interior offensive lineman in the draft. You know, depending on what you read, depending on what your scheme was, the Bills got him in the second round. They appear to be very excited about it, and they don't have a high-end interior offensive line. So I think him not starting week 1 doesn't have to be a catastrophe or a disaster. And in a lot of ways, it's predictable with Ryan Bates being a solid starter. But at the end of the day, it sure would be nice to get your second round pick on the field, and this appears to be his gateway to doing that.
I like the idea of giving him a higher snap share, letting a guy that currently seems like he's sitting in the position Bates kind of relax a little bit. It's essentially you just giving the meaningful reps that a young player at this level needs to get in order to get more familiar, become more comfortable, and things like that, while also seeing what you have in him. So it's like, I think there's a lot of high end talent. And as you mentioned, we both are kind of wanting him to be the guy, wanting him to be the starter, just because it adds both more flexibility and potentially more higher ceiling to a guard position, something that we really haven't had in a long time. We haven't had high level guard play in years. It's the prospect of the potential again when it comes to Torrance, and understanding that this guy is the real deal. This guy's legit. He was phenomenal in college. He was clearly the best guard in the draft. It felt like this past draft. So I have no problem in a world where Bates wins the guard position. I just want to see a guy like Torrance win it. So if all of a sudden him just getting a higher percentage of snap share proves to this coaching staff potentially that what they have there just seems to be the better option, so be it. It just gives him more opportunity, though, to hopefully show that. Or it gives him more or it gives the coaching staff more time to kind of see that maybe he does need a little bit more time sitting back, and they do have to go with Bates moving forward. It's kind of a double-edged sword in the best way possible. I think giving him the higher, you know what you have in Bates. Bates is going to be serviceable at the guard position and will hopefully do a fine job there. You just now have all of these games in your hand right at the moment in time in the preseason that you can utilize in the best way possible by giving the majority of them to Torrance. And even when Allen's on the field next week, I will be fascinated more so with that. But tomorrow with Kyle Allen and Barkley, it doesn't matter. It's like if the majority of time, if not the whole time, is Torrance out there at the right guard position, that's just great for him. And it's great for the coaching staff as well when it comes to just evaluating that position battle that is the right guard position.
The 5th guy on my list is a guy we've talked about a lot already tonight, Khalil Shakir. I think it's an important moment for him. Not only I expect him to return punts tomorrow, and the Bills are still in search of their primary returner after Naheem Hines went down. It sounds like Khalil Shakir is a leader in the clubhouse for that. There's been a couple of muffs out there at St. John Fisher. You'd love to see the Bills have some confidence in him as the returner. I'd love to see him get some opportunities to catch the ball, run after catch, make some plays. And it would be great if Khalil Shakir could really put a stamp on this game. no need to really rehash that. Luka, we talked about him a lot tonight, but since we're wrapping up the show here, let me ask you this, and this was not in our notes, so this will catch you off guard. Monday, when we drop Bill's Chat podcast, anywhere your audio podcast can be found, and on Bill's Chat YouTube, you can find the video version if you just can't get enough of our faces. We will be talking about this game, among other things. Who is the player that we haven't mentioned tonight that we are going to be mentioning on Monday as, wow, he had a good game?
Ooh. Yeah, you can't drop a bomb like me.
You want me to give you mine so you can think about it?
Yeah, you go. You start on that one.
All right. I'm thinking, so I thought about this for a while. I like Shavers. I like Quentin Morris in this spot. I think Quentin Morris is a guy that is largely forgotten with how good Dalton Kincaid and Dawson Knox are. I expect Quentin Morris to be the third tight end on this team and make the roster. You always look at a running back in preseason because that's just one of those things where teams, when they get down into the bottom of the barrel, their running backs, they just, their offensive line, they just feel better about running the ball versus trying to pass. But my guy is going to be the Bills' 5th-round pick, Justin Shorter. I think he's going to get a large snap share. I think he has the skill set where he can bully some of these backup defensive backs on the Colts. And I think Justin Shorter has a chance to really make some plays out there. And I don't want to say this condescendingly, and maybe have his Duke Williams or Brandon Riley moment where he takes over a preseason game. But ultimately for him, maybe it matters more to the long term of his career. One last thought, though, and this is another direction you could go. The Colts are going to be playing without their starting right tackle, Braden Smith, and their starting left tackle, Bernard Raymond, is a guy you were high on in the draft, but he has not been a great player so far to this point. And they're going to have Freeland at right tackle. I think early on, especially with a rookie quarterback, depending on how much they're willing to drop back and pass, there's no Jonathan Taylor. I think early on, you could see Leonard Floyd, AJ Epinesa, Boogie Basham really have a favorable matchup and maybe get Anthony Richardson down to the ground. He's a hard guy to catch, but if you do, I could see the edge rushers on the Bills in the first quarter having an impact on this game.
It's funny. I almost thought you were going to go there, but overall, the name that kind of, looking over the depth that I have in front of me and stuff, the name that my eye has been drawing to this whole time is Darrington Evans. Just for some reason, I'm like, he seems, just based on just who he is as a player, what happens in preseason games and stuff like that, especially the first preseason game, he could be easily someone we're sitting here talking about being like, are they going to go 4 running backs deep? Did Evans just play himself onto this roster? All the things like that. Naturally, we didn't really talk about Damar Hamlin, but of course we will be talking about Damar Hamlin when it comes to our podcast. But that's kind of low hanging fruit. I'm not going to say that. I do think that potentially the Shane Rays, Boogie Basham, stuff like that. I do think Boogie Basham shined last year in this exact same game where he had the strip sack fumble that then Terrell Bernard almost got chased down by an offensive lineman as he went into the end zone. He could definitely shine. I think Boogie Basham's that kind of guy that when you put depth offensive line in front of him and you put guys that are really just kind of raw or rough around the edges and are just not skilled enough to be a regular offensive lineman at this level, he can thrive. I think Boogie Basham has enough in his toolbox and has enough ability and strength and whatnot when it comes to being an edge presence that he can absolutely take over those kind of preseason games, especially going into the second half. It's just, we need to see that then against the upper end, the starters and things like that. And that's where, unfortunately, he falls short at times, if not a lot of times. So tomorrow, and then on the episode we record Sunday night, that releases Monday, first thing in the morning. Yeah, Boogie Basham, Darrington Evans, of course, Damar Hamlin, looking it over and stuff like that. Yeah, those are kind of the guys I look at being like, yeah, they're most likely the individuals we'll be talking about. Shane Ray's kind of a dart throw long shot. If he can step up in a depth situation against third string offensive line to maybe try to elevate himself being the high end talent that he potentially can be, he's someone. But overall, those are kind of the names that stick out to me.
I'm so glad you mentioned Shane Ray because I think he, in a lot of ways, is like Andy Isabella on the offense, where I think before training camp started, it was, and Andy Isabella, I don't even think was on the roster right when training camp started, but
Nope.
I think in a lot of ways it was, I mean, it's fun, maybe a practice squad guy, but I think they both play positions where if they flash in preseason, there is a path here. Because as much as I like Shaq Lawson is not somebody that's going to provide edge rushing juice off of the bench. If Shane Ray can come out here in favorable matchups against the Colts, who are playing without Braden Smith, who are playing Freeland and Bernard Raymond, and then their depth after that is obviously going to be worse. If he can get Anthony Richardson to the ground, or even in the second half, get a sack or a couple tackles for loss, it's going to spark a conversation, because he was once a first round pick in this league. Andy Isabella was once a day 2 pick in this league and has electric speed. And we know the Bills have wanted to get faster. I think the door is wide open for both of these guys to put Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott in an uncomfortable position with their roster. And that is a fantastic spot to be in. We are no longer in the spot, Luka, where we are just trying to figure out, do we even have 53 guys that are worthy of an NFL job? No, the Bills are going to cut some players that other teams are going to gladly pick up. But my final thought here on this is, and I'll kick it back to you, I think Shane Ray and Andy Isabella, more than maybe anybody else on this roster, have a huge opportunity tomorrow to flip the narrative and maybe play their way on to the 2023 Buffalo Bills.
I'm secretly rooting for Andy Isabella. I kind of have an affinity to him, just going back to when he was first drafted, where he was fascinating enough, he was speedy enough, he was on a team that I enjoyed watching on the regular basis out there in the desert, where it's like, if he could just be in the right situation, if he could figure things out, he was not perfect even out there in Arizona and stuff. It's like, you just need things to work out. But if he can kind of find his niche, if he could maybe win the returner position, win the returner job, and really excel and force the Bills' hand to be like, hey, you either got to keep 7 receivers on this roster, or you have to make a very difficult decision on who you're going to let up, because he clearly won the returner position. I'm okay with that, because it just, you can never have too many good options. Like, as you said, we're no longer living in a world where, do we even have 53 grown men willing to roster and pay an NFL wage? No, we have to actually make very difficult decisions. And you will probably have guys like Shane Ray on the kind of veteran practice squad situation here with the Bills, and then still trying to make a roster somewhere. It's interesting. It's like, it's funny too, because I look at tomorrow's game in a very interesting lens, where the Bills are a team that there's a lot of fun, different individuals that you're going to be paying attention to that can win jobs. Things like Andy Isabella, Shane Ray, if he stands out, stuff like that. It's like, cool. It's like, they're exciting guys that you'll see later on in the game. But then overall, it's like, I expect the Colts overall to be a better looking team on the offensive side of the ball, because you are Anthony Richardson, Gardner Minshew, and Sam Ellinger. It's like, and we're going out there with Kyle Allen and Matt Barkley. Not to spoil anything, I will be gambling on that game, and I will be probably betting the Colts, because they just have better quarterbacks going out there. That's just how you bet preseason games.
You are degenerate.
But overall, it's just funny to me, because it's like, look, there's a lot of different things you can look at with the Bills in the third and fourth quarters of a first preseason game that will be kind of interesting to me. Andy Isabella returning kicks and probably getting some wide receiver snaps. Shane Ray getting a lot of edge looks and stuff of that nature against Sam Ellinger back there for the Colts. It'll be fascinating to watch that game tomorrow, as much as I just do not. I say all of this stuff with a massive tongue-in-cheek situation here, because it's like, it is so painful for me to try to sell myself on like, oh man, I'm really looking forward to Jake Funk in the backfield with Sam Ellinger against Shane Ray on the Bills defense, and Alex Austin covering out wide with Juwan Winfrey. Oh, what a time it's going to be tomorrow.
If the Bills lose tomorrow, is it going to ruin your day?
No, no. I mean, I just said I was going to probably bet on the Colts.
Yeah.
I haven't made that decision yet, but it's like, if Sam Ellinger versus Matt Barkley is the matchup with depth pieces around them, I'll probably just take the guy who's younger and has an arm for himself. But yeah, it won't. Result does not matter when it comes to actual fandom and the landscape of my mental capacity to handle whatever happens.
So I have one final thought here before we kind of let everybody know what's coming up this week on Bills Chat. I was looking back at some old Bills Colts games, and there's some doozies. There was the snow game with Ryan Fitzpatrick, week 17, where the Colts had everything wrapped up, but Reggie Wayne and Dallas Clark were like a couple catches short of some important benchmarks. So they basically came in and threw screens to both of those guys to get them their catches and got the backups in, and then the Bills ran them out of the building with that was Terrell Owens' year.
I was gonna say is that was also just fun fact. All-time favorite Bill for name-wise, Joe Klopfenstein played that game at
Oh,
tight
there you
end.
go.
Boom. I remember that game forever because he played that game randomly. I don't know why. Just sorry, move on.
There was the Marlon Mack game in Josh Allen's first year where they went to Indy and Josh Allen was hurt, and they had finally realized maybe Nathan Peterman's not the answer. Like, oh, weird, right? So let's just sign Derek Anderson off the street. And the Bills went there and scored 5 points. There was the opener in Rex Ryan's first game where Tyrod Taylor hits Percy Harvin for that big touchdown. And I'm just telling you, Luka, that was like one of the more hyped moments in drought Bills, because I really thought that team with Rex Ryan had a chance to be special. That was pretty cool because the Colts were highly ranked. Yeah, I think they may have been coming off their AFC title game at that point in time.
Yep.
They were certainly making deep playoff runs. And then the all-timer for me, I went to a Bills-Colts game, by the way, 2003. I went out to the only time I've ever been to Buffalo for a game. The Bills lost to the Colts, I want to say 17-14. Edgerrin James had 2 rushing touchdowns. The Bills were spiraling out of control at that point of the season. But the all-timer for me, 2006, the Bills go to Indy to take on the team that was about to win the Super Bowl. The Colts were going to go win the Super Bowl a couple months later, and they were a heavy favorite in that game. The Bills trotted out J.P. Lossman, and not even Marshawn Lynch at running back, not even Willis McGahee. It was the A-Train Anthony Thomas was their starting running back in that game. And they go into this game against the best offense in the league. Dick Duran is their head coach, folks. So maybe you know where the story's going. First drive, the Bills drive down. I mean, they're putting together a drive. They're going for it. 3rd and 9 from the 10-yard line, halfback draw to Anthony Thomas to kick the field goal. They played for the field goal against the Colts. They actually almost won the game. Ryan Lindell missed a field goal in that game. Terrence McGee had a fumble return for a touchdown. They clearly didn't do anything offensively. But anyway, I just thought that was like the ultimate sum up of Dick Duran's time in Buffalo, which was, hey, 3rd and 9, and Peyton Manning and Marvin Harrison and Marvin Harrison wasn't there. Reggie Wayne, Joseph Adai, and Dallas Clark on the other sideline. But let's go ahead and play for our field goal because that'll work. Spoiler alert, didn't work. All right, Luka, we have our Bills Chat podcast coming up on Monday, and we will obviously be recapping everything that happened in the Bills-Colts game, everything notable. We're not going to go through like a full game review like we do during the regular season. We also have our next edition of Rivals Watch coming up on that show. We've really been enjoying that, taking a deep dive into the Bills' 2023 opponents. This week, we'll be taking a look at the others, which are the teams that aren't part of a division that the Bills play. So we are going to be focusing on the Cincinnati Bengals, the Jacksonville Jaguars, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. These are the 3 teams that, because of where they finished in their division, that's why they got matched up with the Bills. So that'll be a lot of fun. And then we also have on this show, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this is right. We have the announcement of the 4 Madden giveaway. Madden 24 is coming out next week, Luka. We're giving away 4 copies of Madden 24. It is not too late to enter our contest to get your hands on one of these 4 copies of Madden 24 that we're giving away. But we'll be announcing the winner on Monday morning when the podcast drops. Looking forward to that. And then, Luka, is there a Bills chat coming? Or a Bills? Is there a Sabres chat coming out this coming week?
Yeah, we're winding down here, Josh. I can tell. There will be a Sabres chat this week. Sabres chat this week will be real quick about the Metropolitan Division. I've been talking about it before when we promote it. Finally have things in order. Will not be traveling for work. We're good to go to lock this one in. I'm just going to be discussing how I did with the Atlantic Division, how everything's going on in the Metropolitan Division, the other division in the Eastern Conference, getting everyone up to speed, what has happened, including still wrapping my head around Erik Karlsson being now a Pittsburgh Penguin. I have no idea how they figured that one out, salary cap wise, but they did. And that's pretty wild. It's something I will say, not to steal it. It's awesome to see teams with legendary players and kind of on that last wind to really go all in and just say, screw it. Look, our future in our salary situation, we are effed in about 5 years, unless the salary cap goes up big, but it's like, we are effed in 5 years, but we still have legendary Sidney Crosby. We still have Evgeny Malkin. We still have Chris Letang. Let's go for it. Like, we didn't make the playoffs last year. It was a disappointment. Let's just get Erik Karlsson. Just go all in for it. It's cool to see that kind of stuff, even though you're kind of competing with them to get the playoffs and try to get through them, of course. But I just love seeing teams actually do that whole balls to the wall, go for it. Why not? You have kind of a generation coming to an end. Try to see if you can squeeze one more cup out of it. So we'll be talking about that division, talking about the Metro as a whole, and kind of what their off seasons look like, and kind of how the Sabres stack up against those teams, as we are now only just over a month away from them reporting preseason games, which preseason hockey is just like NFL preseason, where it's a lot of prospects. It's not a lot of excitement. But the one thing I do like about preseason hockey, Josh, is it's like 2 weeks. There's like 5-6 games. And then next thing you know, there's regular season games. And it's like preseason didn't even happen. Like, I feel like NFL preseason drags a little bit. Preseason hockey is like here and gone in no time. It's like it didn't even happen. It's awesome. So yeah, that's what we'll be doing. A little bit of a Rivals Watch hockey edition with the Sabres.
That you can catch that on Bill's Chat on YouTube, and you can also catch the quick chats. Now, training camp is over. There's no more training camp recaps. There will not be daily updates of Bills practice because, quite frankly, the Bills are going to really suffocate a lot of the news that comes out. It's not open to the public. Reporters are limited in what they can report. So it's really going to be gathering information from what we're seeing in these preseason games, and then what reporters are able to dig out of one Bills drive. But we know Sean McDermott keeps a tight lid on that. But our guy Stokes is going to be back this week. He and I have a very fun video coming out because Madden 24 comes out this week. Stokes and I are going to put out a video going through the Bills roster on Madden 24, because Stokes is he'll call himself a Madden savant. I think that's a little strong, but he's really, really good at the game. He's so humble too. We're going to go through the Bills roster and just tell you that, hey, if you're going to take the Bills out on the field, what's the best way to set up this roster? Because Madden is not real life. There's certain players that play better in Madden than they do in real life. Boogie Basham's one of those guys that doesn't do so much in the real life, but man, in Madden, he's got some attributes that get you really excited. Stokes will kind of tell you how you should set that depth chart. It's going to be a great kind of Madden 101 for using the Buffalo Bills. Looking forward to that. Speaking of Madden, there might be a new series coming out to our Bills Chat channel coming this week. We look forward to bringing that to you. And then Luka and I, of course, will be right back here in these very chairs next Friday night for Bills Chat Live. Luka, anything else on your mind before we get out of here?
No, it's exciting. I'm excited because we do have the Madden stuff. We have a lot of bit of a left turn there when it comes to Madden content. We have a lot of plans when it comes to Madden. This time next week, I should hopefully have a physical cover of Josh Allen with me in my nice ensemble back there, hopefully, and stuff for all to see. Excited for all of that stuff, excited for the things to go on. I'm excited, like, even Premier League started today. The English Premier League is back. Real sports are back, Josh. Real sports. I'm not talking preseason football. I'm talking games that matter for the outcome of those leagues. It's exciting times. It's next thing you know, it'll be October, Josh, and we're going to be deep into NFL action, NHL action, EPL action, and Champions League action. Just so many things going on. I don't even know what to do with my life.
You forgot NBA.
No, I didn't forget NBA.
The defending NBA champion Denver Nuggets will start their pursuit.
The regular season of the
repeat.
NBA is preseason. That's what that is.
I would argue with you, but you're right. It's facts. Like it's a lot of load management, especially for the good teams. But I love the NBA. It's been, I think, it's funny. I think I realized, like, once I became a Bills content creator, my love for the NBA got a little stronger. And it's not that I don't love the Bills. The Bills are my number one, and it's not really close. But it was just nice to be a fan without having to think, like, how can I turn this into an entertaining podcast? Like, just watch the game, cheer, boo, and not have to worry about, like, what am I going to say about this to make it sound interesting? So I think that's where that came from. And, you obviously aren't getting that with the Sabres. So maybe you're getting that with Liverpool.
Josh, I can absolutely separate myself from content to watching something as a fan. Like, it is still very real. It's Bill stuff. Like, I sit there and I watch that game like anyone else, very intensely, things like that. And then it's almost like it takes you messaging me, say 20, 30 minutes after the game for me to reel in and be like, oh yeah, we should probably talk about XYZ 1, 2, and 3 on the upcoming podcast. And then I have to then reel it in and kind of go back in the memory bank and be like, oh yeah, this happened, that happened, so on and so forth. So I can at least separate that. And it's unfortunately for my emotions and my heart on my sleeve, it's the real deal when it comes to fandom.
That's when you start slamming waters and coffee to get the other liquids out of your system so you're ready to go by that night. But I'm excited for it. We're almost to the regular season. We got to get through these preseason games first. Hey, one thing we can all agree on, whether you're a Bills fan, whether you're a Cowboys fan that found themselves in our chat tonight, we love that. Whether you're a Colts fan, whatever it is, let's just hope for no injuries. Preseason injuries are the dumbest thing in the world. No injuries to anybody important. And let's get to the regular season with the guys we expect to be out there. Luka and I will be back next week on Bills Chat Live. For Luka, I did it, got the point right. I am Josh McCarty. We will see you next week on Bills Chat Live.